Hello and welcome to Control Delete Tutorials. My name is Jason, and in this video we're going to talk about taking the CSV file that we created from the last video and reading that data in from a CSV file. Now, obviously it doesn't make sense to write to a CSV file if you're just going to read from it, but let's assume that you got a CSV file and you wanted to get that information from that file. So, if you didn't see the last video is going to show how to create this CSV file, this CSV file right here called random data set. And if we open it up, we can take a look at the information contained within. And I'm going to show you how we can put that into our file and then how we can read the information from that file. Now, the data set alone doesn't have a whole lot of great information in it. I just wanted to be able to read out a string, an integer, and a float. So if we zoom this in, any day now. Coffee break while we wait. Okay, good mouth noises there for everybody. Okay, so you can see here in our header we have our name, color, int, float. Our name is going to be from 000 to 999. Color is just randomly generating a color for each of these. That way, if we want to group things together in a later file, we can do that, or in a later project. Just some random integers and some random float values. Okay, so that's what we generated. Don't save. That's what we generated before in a previous video. Okay. So I'm going to just scroll down through here. In case you didn't see it and you want to get that information, you can pause the video, kind of type things up and create this so that you have it. So I'll just slowly go down through here. Okay. Now, I'd appreciate it if you watched that video because that helps me out, but in case you didn't, there's the file. Alright, and I explain everything in the video on how to actually do that. So, in this one, what we're going to do is we're going to read just the data coming from there. In a later video, I'm going to show you guys how to apply that CSV file and create a program that could be used for something like the AP Computer Science create performance task, which is going to be the idea of this series. So first, just being able to write a file, being able to read that file, and be able to take the information in that file and put it to a list and get certain elements from it and run different functions from that information. Now, I'm going to try to keep that video super generic so that way you can kind of see how things work and be able to swap it out for your own information. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get our CSV file into our project. Now you want to make sure the Solution Explorer is up. If you're working in Visual Studio, let's say it has closed. You can hit Control-Alt-L and that will bring it up. Or you can always go over here to View, Solution Explorer, and you can see there it says the hotkey is Control-Alt-L and that will bring it up. Okay, so in your File Explorer, you're going to see here I've got my CSV file. I can go ahead and click and drag that, and where I want to click is at the very top here. So under where it says Solution, there's a little box here that says Pi in it, and it'll have the name of your project or your project. And so I want to drag it there. I'll see that it has a little plus icon. If I drag it down, we're going to notice we get a little no icon. Okay, so I want to drag it up and release. Now we can see it's there. If you did it incorrectly, it's just going to drag it and open it and you'll be able to see it, but it won't be in your project. Okay, so if I open that up, we're going to see our CSV file, which again stands for comma separated values. And we can see we have this header file. Now, one of the tricky things is we could import this into our program, but you'll notice that, let's say I want to read in this integer. Well, the header does not include an integer. The header is text. So I'm going to show you how to deal with these different types of data. Same idea with float here. what we'll do with that. So I'll show how to deal with all that. Let's drag that over there. Don't know why, but I like that on the right. All right, so first things first, we're going to import the CSV module. Okay, that's simple. Just write import CSV. We're going to create a list just to store all of our data to. So I'm going to go ahead and just call this, let's do a different name than what we did in the previous one, just to keep our information different here. So I'm going to do rand data list. In my previous one, I think we said rand data set, and I don't want those to be named the same. It's going to be an empty list, so there is nothing in between our square brackets. Okay, next we'll start the class that we're going to use. And I think I'm going to use the, it's either the same name or similar name. Let's take a look at the previous one, just so we don't name exactly the same. Yeah, so in the previous one, my class was random data set. Again, trying to keep this different so we don't do everything exactly the same. So I'll start off with the class keyword. Let's move that cursor out of the way. And we're going to do random data. Okay, that's going to be our class. We'll start off our class with our constructor. And again, that's going to use our magic method. So that's 2 underscores, just like we showed in the last video, 2 underscores in a row. INIT stands for initialize. So this will be one of the first things that we see. We'll first start our constructor with the name we want to give our class when we're referencing this class itself. So we just use self. Some people like to use this. I use self. Okay, so we're going to do self, and then we're going to say what is the different information that we want to take in. I just lost a pencil off my desk. Super important information to share with everyone. All right, so name, color, int, float. Okay, so we're going to name our arguments here for our constructor kind of similar. So we're going to say name. I'm going to go with color. I'm going to call this rand underscore int, because it is a random integer. And then we're going to go, same idea, rand underscore and float. Okay, we end our defining there with a colon, and everything gets indented underneath here. Now we're going to set up our attributes. So the first one is going to be name. And by the way, just in case you didn't, okay, so anytime we're dealing with anything inside of the class, when we're referring to the class, we use self. And here the attributes are named self dot the attribute's name. Okay, so that's going to equal our argument up here, name. Okay, and you don't have to name these the same. I'll show you with the next two that I'm not going to do that. This will be self dot color equals color, and self dot, we'll go ahead and do this as random int equals. So you can see here, we don't have to have these named exactly the same. So this is what the attribute will be called. This is reading in the data from the constructor argument. And self dot random float equals rand float. Okay. All right. That's really all we're going to do with this class. Now you could put all of your different functions and stuff in here. We're not going to do that. Let's hit enter 2 times, backspace 2 times to exit our class, and now move into the main block of code. Okay, next I'm going to work on the function that we're going to use to read our CSV file. Now I typically just name this read underscore CSV. And we're outside of the class, so we don't have to start off with self. We're not referencing the class here. Okay, so here I'm going to take a file name. Now you don't have to do it this way. You could leave no arguments here. I'm just trying to show us that we can have a argument that we take in here. And you'll see where that comes in later. So here I'm going to use a with statement. And we're going to say with open. And again, when we open a file, if we use with open, it'll automatically open and close the file. Otherwise, we're going to have to manually go in and open the file and then manually close the file and remember to do that. This makes it easier to do that, so we can say with open. We put in our file name. Now, in this case, I'm going to have it so when we call this function, we put in the file name here. So that'll make our open here a little shorter. So this is going to be the file name that we're using. Oops. Still have that selected. Okay. Now, in the previous video, we saw that if we wanted to write to a file, we use W. If we're reading from a file, we use R. And there are other string arguments that we could put in there that, again, look at the documentation. The Python API will show you other arguments that you can put in there, other letters that you can use for read, write, and different things. Okay, actually no other comma there. So we're just going to read. There is a new line option that you can put there. We don't need that for the file that we have. We're going to alias this file as CSV underscore file. Okay, and alias just means the name we are giving this. Okay, so we're giving a name to reading or opening this file up. Okay, so when we hit enter, we should indent. If you didn't indent, that means you probably forgot the colon there. All right, next we're going to set up our reader. So this is going to be CSV underscore reader. Pretty standard naming here. Equals, we're going to call on the CSV module or class. And we're going to call reader from here. Okay, now reader takes in a couple of different arguments. The first one being what is the file that we're using? That's going to be our CSV file here. If I just copy that, I can paste it in. I like to copy and paste to keep myself from typing things incorrectly. Okay, next we're going to do our delimiter. So a delimiter is basically saying how are these different columns separated in our file. And if we look, we can see they are separated by commas. So our delimiter is going to be, in quotes, a comma. Okay, don't put a comma in a space, just a comma in between your quotes. And again, you can use single quotes, you can use double quotes, whichever way you like. I prefer double quotes myself just because I'm used to working in other programming languages that use double quotes. Okay, so this is going to be our reader, okay, which has our file and how we're separating everything. Okay, I'm going to show you guys something we'll do here in a little bit that will keep us from getting certain problems. So I'm going to show you how we can do this the very minimum way, and then I'm going to show you how to write it better. So the first way is I'm going to go through and write a for loop that's going to go through every item in my CSV reader and put it to my class, and we'll store it as a temporary object, a temporary random data object, and then we'll add that to our list. So here I'm going to say I typically do row. You can do line, whatever you want to call each part of your CSV, each row in your CSV. So we're going to say for row in CSV underscore reader. Okay, so remember for loops use a item in collection format. So for item in our collection, our item we are calling row. So this is each item in our collection. So in this case, this is going to be row. Each time this is row, and then the next time the for loop runs, this is row, and the next time it runs, this is row. And then each of these is indexed. So this would be 0, 1, 2, and 3. So row represents an entire row. Okay, and we have 1,000 rows, so that means this is going to go through all 1,000 rows. Okay, so what we want to do here is we want to say, let's create our temporary object that we're going to be overwriting every time this for loop goes. I'm going to say temp ran data, okay, because we're doing random data. And we'll call our ran data class, okay. And we'll call the constructor here. And how do we construct? Well, here we have name, color, rand int, rand float, named exactly as they appear up here. So however we name these will show what IntelliSense is showing here, our autocomplete, if you will. All right, so the name. What is the name? Well, the name is whatever row this is, index 0. Okay, so we have something that's storing each row. And to put the index, we just use our square bracket notation. and we say index 0. So that's going to be the row. Okay, next we're going to have our color. Now if we go to our thing here, color is in our row index 1, okay, because we start counting at 0, 0, 1. Okay, so this is going to be row 1. All right, now we're getting into something tricky. I want to read in this information, my integers, as integers. Now, this is going to cause us a problem in this row, but we'll fix that later. So if I want this information to be an integer, I'm going to go ahead and close out my Solution Explorer here just to make sure I have enough room here where I'm writing, just so we can see everything. So I want to convert row 2, or row index 2, to an integer. Okay, so I can use the int function for this, which converts whatever inside of it. As long as there's an integer available, it'll convert it to an integer. So, because everything that comes into our CSV file is a string or textual data. All right, so this is going to be row and 2. And then I will go outside of our parentheses, inside of our 1, finishing up our random data. Our last one is going to be a float. So we'll convert it using the float function. And inside of here, we're going to do row 3. Okay, so that's going to take all of our information. So this is creating an object out of our random data class, and it's going to take each row's information, the columns if you will, 0, 1, 2, and 3, and it's going to supply them for each of these and store them as the attributes. Okay, after I've created the object, I then want to go in and add that object to our list. What is our list? Random data list. I'm going to double click up here, copy. I'm going to come down here and paste. Okay, how do we add to our list? We use the dot operator, which gives us the functions and attributes or variables that are in our class. So here we can see I have append. Okay, so we can append our list. We can add on to our list. And since append is a method, it has parameters, and inside the parameters it's looking for the object we want to add to our list, our object being our temp random data that we just created. So that's going to get added to our list, and then when the for loop runs again, it's going to overwrite this, but it's going to append it to the list as well, but it won't overwrite the original one. Okay, so let's do a couple things here. So we're going to read our CSV file. And that part is good. So let's go ahead and just test this as is and see what issues we end up getting. So I'm going to hit enter 2 times, backspace 3 times. I'm going to create a function here, just called start, kind of like I did in the previous video. It's not going to take any arguments. I just prefer to write things this way. So we are going to call our read CSV. Okay, and here we're looking for our file name. Now our file name is the name of our file. So we can see up here it is random_dataset.csv. So if yours is called, I don't know, football highlights 2020.csv, that's what you would type in there. Depends on your CSV file. So this is going to be random_dataset.csv. Okay, that means it's going to take the file name here. That's going to get stored as our file name, and our file name will go here. Now, the only reason I do it this way is because our file name could be kind of long, and it would go off our screen. I'm just trying to give it the most room that I can kind of give it here. So in case I had to put the actual directory address in there, and this was going to be a lot longer, it's just not crowding this part up. Also, this allows me to call read CSV on any CSV file. If I want to, have multiple files, I could do that. And I could create different variables or different lists depending on that. Okay. All right, so we are going to print out some information here from the data set here. Okay, so I'm going to just have it so we print out. So let's say for each, let's say item, just a generic name, in our list. Okay, so our list up here. just going to copy and paste that here. Okay. And I'm just going to print out this information for now, just so we can see that it works. I'm going to use an F string, and I'm going to label each thing that I print out. So I'm going to say name, colon, curly braces. So remember, the curly braces, when we're using an F string, allows us to put a variable directly in here. So this is going to be our item. And remember, every item in this list is of the random data class, or a random data object. And each of these have a name attribute, color attribute, random int attribute, and random float attribute. Okay, so if I type item dot name, I'm going to print out the name for that specific item. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing for the other ones. Let's go ahead and just duplicate so we can either copy and paste this, or if you're lucky, you can hit Control D and you can get extra ones here. You can always copy and paste. All right, so this is going to be our color. That's not how you spell color. That's also not how you spell color. Okay, and item.color. And then we have random int. Again, I like to copy and paste. I'm going to call this just int for now. And then we have float, random float. And I'm just going to call this float for now. Now, in the last video I explained, I could either put a \n here, which will make sure that every time it prints a set of these, it's going to give a space in between them, okay? Or, if that looks weird to you and you're afraid you're going to use the wrong slash, so / instead of a \, you can always just type print parentheses. That works too. And I like this just because it's visually easy to see in the code, and it'll give us a space in between. All right, and start hasn't been called yet, so let's go ahead and hit enter a couple times, backspace, all the way over, and we'll call the start function. Okay, so the start function is going to call our read CSV, and then it's going to print out all of our information. Now, a couple of things. We're going to get an error. One, because our header row does not contain a integer or a float here. So we're going to get an error to start off, and let's just go ahead and take a look at that so we get our error. All right, so error pops up, and our error says exception unhandled invalid literal for int with base 10 int. So that's telling us that our data that we're trying to read is not an integer. Okay, that's a problem. The same thing would happen to float, but we already get this with here. So there's a couple of ways we can handle this. One way we can handle it is using a try except. So try except just simply says that we're going to try this code, and in the case that we get an unhandled exception, we can print out a message rather than crashing our program. Or we could do something else. So let's go ahead and go up to our for row and CSV reader, colon. We'll hit enter. We're going to say try, colon. We're going to come down to these two lines and indent them in, hitting tab, and that'll move them in. Okay. So we're going to try this. We'll hit enter and backspace, and this is where we'll have our except. Okay, except, and it's looking for what exception type do we want. In this case, we're going to say in the chance of a value error, which is what that exception we just experienced was, do these steps instead of crashing our program. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to print a message to the user. It just simply says, following data, colon, and we're going to show them what that data is. So I'm going to print, and this will be an F string. Okay, and I'm going to space over 4 times. Now you don't have to do this. I'm just doing it so this is like indented in a little bit, so when it prints it out, it's saying this specific data. I just visually like the way this looks. And this is going to follow very much the same thing that we did down here. So I'm going to say name. And I'm just trying to show them what data is here. Okay, in this case, we're not going to do item.name because we're looking at rows. So this would be row and our bracket 0. Okay, so that's our name. I'm going to duplicate this. So Control D. Again, you can just Control C, Control V if that doesn't work for you. This would be our color. That one's going to be 1 because that's our next column. This we're just going to put int instead of random int. And that's going to be 2. And float. And that one will be 3. And then we'll finish up by printing. And this one I won't indent. And I won't need to have a f string just because I'm not putting any variables in here. So I'm going to just say that this was excluded due to a value error. Yeah, that's fine. And then I'll print an empty print after. Again, we could do \n up here, same idea. So instead of getting the error, as soon as it sees that it can't put the information here, it's just going to go down through and it should tell us what information would go here this time around. Unless I'm wrong. Could happen. Okay, so let's try it and see what happens. Alright, so everything is running and it's going to go through all the 1,000 data set items. Okay, and if we scroll to the top, let's see what it says. Oh, interesting. Oh, no, that's correct. Okay, for a second I thought it gave us the wrong thing. So, no, that's what we expect to see. So, the following data, name, name, color, color, int, int, float, float, was excluded due to a value error. Everything else went through, though. So this basically handles the exception we would have had due to the fact that our header row doesn't have an integer here in the second column and then a float here in the third column. Again, I realize it's the fourth column, but 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so that handles that, and that's nice. Another thing that we can do is we can tell this to iterate past our header row, which is also really good. So I could say just to simply skip that row. And the way we can do that is just say, and I know why didn't we just do this at the beginning? So I can show you the problems and show you how to fix them and then show you how to fix them better. Okay, so this next function allows us to essentially iterate past the first item here so that we just skip it when we're doing our for loop. So I'm taking our reader and I'm saying, okay, go to the next thing, and now this is going to start here, essentially. So it's gonna skip past this and go straight to this. Now, in this case, this isn't needed. But let's say at any point in our data set, okay, let's say somebody else entered this and they accidentally entered in information that was incorrect. We want to know that incorrect data. So this is still valid to do. Since we set it up, we know it's correct. But again, you might download a data set from the internet that reads in all kinds of other information, and this is a way that you can fix this. Now, I could have it still store this data and not convert if I wanted to. If I wanted to do that, I could just simply copy this into the value error and take out the conversion here. And that way it would just import that information in as a string, or as a null value, a value of none. Okay, so that's going to allow us to do that. And let's see if there's anything else that we want to do in this video. We printed everything out. Let's go ahead and just look one more time at what this gets us. You'll notice this skips over that first row. We won't be able to see it until the data has gone all the way through. Okay, there we go. And we can see we have the last item there, and if we scroll up, we have the first one, and we don't get that error message at the beginning that we created. So that means that we've read in the CSV, and we've stored it to this random data set, which then gets stored to a list, and we can access any item in that list and get that item's name, its color, the integer, or the float. This also means that if I wanted to, let's say I only wanted to print out information of a certain color. So let me go ahead and just show you how we do that, just so you have it. So let's say here I did if item dot color equals, let's say red. Okay. And I'll tab all of this in. Okay, so I don't know what items are red. I can see from my list here, my first red item is name 15. And ideally, let's not pull up my desktop there. Cool. Okay, that's weird. Okay, so ideally now when I run this, okay, you can go away things. Now I should only get all of the red items. And you can see that was a lot faster, printing that all out. And so there's name 15, red 5. And now we're only getting the red things. So if you downloaded a CSV file where things are grouped, let's say by team, you could have it only print out information from a given team. And when we talk about doing the AP Computer Science Principles create performance task, this might be something that you would want to do as part of the performance task, be able to cycle through and only pull up characters or players from a certain team. And you'd be able to easily do that because you can now get these different attributes from each item in our data set, which makes this real easy to go through. You could also, let's say, only show random int items that are, let's say, greater than or equal to 5. So now I can go through and it should only show me things with an int value greater than 5. Looks like there's a lot of them. Surprising. Okay, let's make sure that works properly. Let's go up. Okay, 997, 5. So we shouldn't have anything that's under 4 here. Okay. So it is skipping around a little bit. That's good. Same idea if we wanted to do the float. I'm just copying and pasting to make this quicker. Okay, and let's say anything over 7.5. Okay, in our float category. Okay, I run it. Okay, so now we should only get things that are above 7.5. Okay, so if you wanted to pull up data on certain players' stats and say they had this many yards ran in whatever season, or complete passes, or whatever you want to use, you can now do that. You can pull up the information based on that. Okay, and that takes us through everything for this video. Hopefully you liked this video and found it informative. If you did, please give it a like. Thanks for watching.